Welcome to FailCraft, the podcast where we dive into the messy, real side of success and explore how setbacks become the stepping stones for growth and clarity. I'm your host, Ezekiel Iferia, and today's guest is Odeani McBean. He is a fatherhood coach, the host of the Mindful Dad podcast, and the creator of the 365 Dad Journal. His journey into mindful fatherhood was born out of intense adversity. He navigated high conflict, co-parenting, and an $80,000 custody battle, a system that often leaves fathers feeling entirely undervalued. Through that fire, he realized that the traditional framework of fatherhood, where men are just expected to be stoic providers and strict disciplinarians, is a broken metric that sets dads up to fail. He teaches men how to break free from outdated norms, let go of the illusion of control, and become emotionally present nurturers. He's here to talk about surviving the family court system, why vulnerability is a superpower, and how to parent from intuition rather than fear. So, Odini, I am super excited to welcome you to FailCraft. Thank you very much for joining us here today.
Man, Ezekiel, thank you for having me. That was a great introduction. I was like that if anyone could say, "What do you do?" I would read that exactly like that. So I appreciate that warm intro and I'm grateful to be here. Thank you for having me.
A pleasure having you here on the show today, Odini. So let's get started. You survived an $80,000 custody battle. Did fighting that intensely for your child make you realize that measuring a dad's success purely by his ability to provide financially is a failure of what children actually need?
I would agree with that. Yeah. Because, when I was going through that custody battle, it was about 3 years. And at the time, I was only bringing in maybe $50,000 a year. Right. And this process cost me more than that. And so you would imagine a lot of debt was incurred throughout that time. And it was just a tough financial time for me. And throughout those moments, I realized I wasn't necessarily being that almighty provider, right? That you would think of for my son at the time, but I still gave him like all this time, all this presence, right? All this affection. And so I had moments where, you know, I had to call my family, hey, can you provide pizza for Caleb and I? I couldn't even afford pizza, for example, right? So on one end, most men would be in that position and they would be like, man, this sucks. I can't even buy dinner for me and my son. And I won't lie to you. Of course, I went through that phase. But then once I looked the other end of it, I'm like, actually, I'm being present, right? I'm actually fighting to have him half the month. I think that's best for him, is for him to have both of his parents equally, right? And so that emotional presence and that physical presence to me far outweighs, the having to always be the number one provider at all times.
All right, Odini. So you teach that one of our biggest failures in parenting is trying to control our children. So how does gripping too tightly actually push our kids away? And what does it look like to parents in flow instead?
Yeah, I like that way you phrased it, parenting and flow. That's actually a good way to put it. You know, I'm Jamaican, right? I'm Caribbean. And so I feel like a lot of folks who have the traditional Caribbean dad upbringing, it's kind of like, I'm the dad, I'm up here, you're the kid, you're down here, and what I say goes, right? And so what I
Mm.
kind of teach dads is this often gets misconstrued with, oh, let kids run all over you, right? That's not what we're saying here. What we're saying is just have the mindset of your child is not beneath you, right? And so if you approach fatherhood with this mindset of your child is not beneath you, then you start being more open to tapping into whatever they're going through. So, for example, if something is upsetting me with my son, throughout this process, I'm starting to realize it's not so much more about what he's doing. It's about how it's about me, right? And why is it triggering me? And so if I was parenting in the old way, like how my father was parenting and how he was parented, I wouldn't even think to care about what he's going through. It's all about my frustration. And then I lash out that way. Versus parenting, like you say, from flow, you could say parenting from intuition is almost like, okay, we have a matter at hand here. Cool, what's the best way to understand what the matter is, right? Well, so what's the best way for
Mm.
him, or I have a 4-year-old daughter as well, what's the best way for them to communicate with me about what's the issue here? And just even asking that question from the jump sets the tone for a completely different father to son, father to daughter interaction. And so kind of what I teach is like most men, most dads that I come into contact with, they want to take that step, right? It's not that they don't want to be able to understand their kids and see where their kids are coming from before they lash out. They don't even, it's kind of like they're parenting unconsciously. They can't even think about it in a moment to say, okay, well, let me find out what's really happening here. And that's just like a mindset shift.
Okay, all right. So, society expects fathers to be strict enforcers of the house. So, how hard was it to dismantle that societal conditioning and give yourself permission to actually be a nurturer?
Oh man, how hard. I would say that was probably the hardest thing for me to do, because, from the beginning of my parenting journey, I've always known that I wanted to approach it a little bit different than my dad, right? And I love my dad. I empathize with him, right? But he is 71, so he didn't grow up in a time where they sit and they reflect, and that just wasn't a thing in the culture. So I already knew when my son was born, I was going to do a lot of things different. I was going to show up to everything he had going on. I was going to be more emotional. I was going to be more physically affectionate with him. But the one thing initially that I did not change was that, I'm big and bad. I'm the disciplinarian. Like, you better listen to me or else, right? So
Yeah,
I was doing
yeah.
everything else differently, but that one thing I was not able to do differently. And so I would say that was probably the hardest thing for me to really laser in on and be intentional about. But I'm glad I did that because, so one thing I'll say is and I've said this for some years now. If you were to ask me what's like my ultimate parenting flex, right? I say I figured out how to be not only the quote unquote disciplinarian, but I'm also the understanding guy, right? Like I'm also the one that my son will come to when he feels no one else understands what he's going through, right? He's going to come and sit and talk to me. And so I like to say I figured out how to be the nurturer and also how to be kind of like that voice where it's like, all right, man, like this is what we have to do, right? But this is what we have to do doesn't have to look like a bunch of yelling, a bunch of threats, right? So it's ways
Mm,
that it's ways that we can set a standard without making that all we do. All we do is give tough love. All we do is be the one that they know not to come to when they get in trouble, right? And I didn't want to be that way. I kind of wanted to be the one that if I said something, I'm setting a standard and this is the expectation we have. But I also want to be the one that is, if you're going through something, if you mess up, you make mistakes, I want you to be able to come and talk to me. And I can
mm,
understand, I can get to the root of why you behaved this way. Why do you thought this was the best thing to do instead of this thing? And, I never had the chance to have that ladder, that conversation as to, well, tell me about this. Tell me what went into that thought. Right. And so I just think as men, we could do both. We can nurture, we can provide support emotionally, physically. That's fine. We can be there spiritually, mentally, and we can also say, hey, that's enough. You heard what I said the first time, right? It's okay to do both. We don't have to stick to the, hey, that's enough. Like, we don't have to be that guy only. You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah. Yeah, so you have this really interesting philosophy that fatherhood is more about guiding yourself than guiding your children. So, Udini, when a father gets triggered by his kids, is he usually just projecting his own unhealed childhood failures onto them?
right? And so often when I go into this type of conversation, I think the folks who maybe have a different perspective, philosophy, it seems as though they think what I'm saying is we're not going to hold children accountable, right? So that's not
Mm,
what I'm saying, right? And so
yeah,
that often gets misconstrued. And so what I'm saying is if we actually took the time, if you said, okay, here are 10 examples when I just lost it. Like my kid said something, my kid did something, and I just absolutely lost it. I went nuts. If we sat down and reflected on each one of those moments, I am willing to guarantee 70, 80, 90% of the root cause for your reaction is probably to do with some sort of unhealed inner child trauma, right? And I always give this example as, sometimes my son, he used to complain a lot about, I don't want to eat this, like I don't want this. And now here he is, he has taste buds just like I have taste buds, right? So if I'm giving him something and he just genuinely is not a fan of it, he does not like what his taste buds are experiencing, why am I yelling at him and telling him, what do you mean you don't like this? You better eat what's in front of you. Why am I doing that? I'm doing that because I know when I was his age, I couldn't even, there's no way in the world I'm gonna look at my parents and say, oh, I'm not really a fan. I
yeah.
think my mom is the best cook in the entire universe. But I'm sure there are things that she put in front of me as a kid that I just was not a fan of. But I couldn't even say that to her. And so sometimes we get that trigger where you're like, ooh, like I didn't even,
Mm.
you're robbing me of an experience I couldn't have. You know what I mean? And so I think it's most of the things that we really that trigger us, something's more to do with us than the person that we're triggered by. And that's in any relationship. Parenting, it could be coworkers, it could be a romantic relationship, friendships, right? If something is really triggering you, it's what I like to call a reflection. And so we need to do the work to see, well, what's reflecting right now.
Okay, so many men thought or they believe that showing emotion is a weakness. So why is hiding our struggles and pretending to be perfect actually failing our kids? And how does vulnerability build respect?
Yeah. And so I think for a good amount of my early parenting fatherhood journey, I took that first approach, right? I took the approach of I'm going to be kind of very much a rock, I can't falter, I can't fold. My son can't see me do this. And I started to realize as he got a little older that it's way more beneficial for him to see me as my whole self, right? It's way more beneficial for him to see me as somebody who rises, somebody who falls, somebody who gets back up. And rising, falling, getting back up never looks perfect, right? And so I want him to see that. So I want him to see me be human. I want him to see me bounce back from adversity. And so I can't have him going through life thinking, man, when he gets my age and when he's an adult, he has to bottle everything, right? He can't express his emotions to his children, his spouse, his friends. He just has to take on the world by himself. And I think that's a man's downfall. I think that's a father's downfall is just in general feeling like you have to take on the world by yourself. And so when I show my son my ups and my downs, I think it just makes him a better young man in general. When I show my daughter my ups, my downs, she's going to grow into a woman that I feel because of how I'm choosing to show up as a dad. When she gets into relationships, she knows, I don't really want this guy seems like he's not cool with telling me how he feels. Like, that's
Mm,
not really what I'm into. And so yeah, I just think it benefits kids to let them see you be your full authentic self, right? Like I feel like we humanize parenting a lot, and it's a human process. So I think it's okay for our kids to see us in our glory and our, our
Okay, okay. So, Odini, you are the creator of the 365 Dad Journal. So, first, tell us about it. And also, for a lot of men, sitting down to journal their feelings feels completely foreign. So, how does putting pen to paper actually build the emotional intelligence required to lead a family?
Yeah, great question. So the 365 Dad Journal is a journal that I created. Released it around summer of 2024. And the journal basically has 365 prompts. It's undated, so you don't have to feel pressured. Oh, I missed January 18th. Like I gotta, it's undated.
All right.
Every single prompt in the journal I created based off of my fatherhood experience. So, every single prompt is based off of something I've went through as a dad, which I know most people are going to relate to. And so there's four key pillars of the journal. So there's going to be prompts that speak on mindfulness. What can we do to really reflect and be mindful as we're parenting? There's questions that address building a bond, a stronger connection with our children. There's prompts that address self reflection, right? Like we talked about earlier, like, man, why am I reacting this way? Right. And we journal, we get to the root of that. And then there's the fourth pillar is building community. So there's prompts around why is it important to build community in fatherhood and, with other dads. And as far as, the importance of it, I like to explain it as an onion, right? And so a lot of the times, if we feel, let's say, undervalued, we feel like we're always snapping, whatever we're going, whatever pain point we have as dads, the first thing we typically think of is, the very outside of the onion. Oh, this is happening because I'm stressed out at work. Oh, this is happening because I didn't bring in enough the money that I want to bring in this month. Oh, this is happening because of that. That's why I'm yelling. That's why I feel overwhelmed. That's why I feel unstable. And then once you put pen to paper, you just have free will to continue digging deeper. And I always say through journaling, I've had so many fatherhood moments and man moments, even outside of fatherhood, where by expressing my emotions on paper, I got to the core of the onion, right? I got to the inside layer, the third, fourth layer of the onion. And that's what I think the biggest, I would say, benefit of journaling for a man is. Oftentimes we're not in society, we're not told, you can go a little deeper, right? Like, you can actually, it's more than just what's on the surface. And I think journaling is a great way to get deeper.
Yes, that was a really great response. You went into the depth of the question to give a fantastic answer for it. For the dad listening right now who is stuck in a high conflict co-parenting situation and feels completely overwhelmed and undervalued. So what is the first mindful step he can take today to start protecting his peace?
Yeah, this is a great question. So, a lot of the times I would typically lead off with building some sort of mindfulness practice, right? So cultivating some form of sitting in silence, that's just an option, right? Meditation is something I've had a meditation practice for years, and it's going to, like all things, it's a muscle. It's going to grow. You stick with it. Journaling is also something that I always tell dads to do. But I would say, actually, if I could re-answer this question, the many other times I've spoke on this, I would actually start with one thing, which is a mindset shift. And so when I was going through my custody battle with my son's mom, co-parenting, I felt as though this woman hated me, right? I felt as though like this woman didn't want wish any well on me, and I this is how I felt. Once I truly realized that actually we both want what we think is best for our child, then I may disagree with what she thinks is best. And that's why we're in that predicament. She disagrees with what I think is best. I disagree with what she thinks is best. And now we unfortunately are into this court system. But if initially I can just have this mindset of, you know what, while I disagree, I know that the love you have for our child is why we're going through this. You know, the love I have for our child is why we're going through this. First, mindset shift. So that completely now, when you switch that mindset, we talked about parenting and flow. You
Yeah.
navigate the adversity through and flow, right? It's much easier to navigate what comes your way when you're feeling undervalued, when you're feeling unstable, if the only thing you need to fix is yourself, as opposed to needing to think, this person hates me, this person doesn't like me, this person doesn't like me, right? So it just takes all the added drama away from it. And you just have this mindset shift as there's love here. The love looks a little different, and that's fine. We're not going to agree with everything. And so once I started to realize, like, okay, this woman truly feels that the best thing for our son is this, and she's doing that because she actually truly feel, no matter how she's expressing it, how I'm perceiving what she's expressing, the root is she thinks this is best for him. I disagree, and now we have to go through this process, but going through that process feels a lot more manageable if you just shift that mindset. And then after you shift that mindset, that's when, I think you kind of just, you find the time to be in silence. You find the time to reflect.
All right. So here's a personal one for you, Odini. After surviving the custody battles, breaking the outdated norms of fatherhood, and building a mindful life, what does being successful truly mean to you now?
Being successful truly means to me, I would say two things. I'll give you a fatherhood version and just an individual version. And so success to me as a dad is if your children are just genuinely joyful, right? Like when I look at my son and I look at my daughter, they are just the happiest kids, right? And because of that, I don't necessarily feel that I have to always give them every single thing they want that will, let's say, quote unquote, provide, right? Because I
Mm.
feel like I've already gotten they've already gotten the best thing life has to offer, which is just genuine joy, genuine love. I see the way they interact with each other, it's genuine love. I see the way they interact with me, it's genuine love. I see the way they interact to a stranger, right? They're very compassionate children. And to me, that's success as a father is because they are this way in society and I didn't pretend to be perfect, right? And they still are this way and I didn't pretend to be, someone that I'm not. And so I would say that's what success for me looks like as a dad is just raising kids that are just joyful. And then as far as individually, man, such a great question. Oftentimes we don't necessarily take the time to think about what success means, for us, especially if we're in the role of serving all the time, right? And
Yeah.
so, if I had to just on the spot think of this answer right now, intuition wise, I would say success for me means that if I lay my head down at night, I feel like I didn't, there's nothing I did that wasn't true to who I was, So I would say that's what success to me feels like. If I can lay down at night and not worry about validation from anybody. And, wow, I had a great day, ups, downs. I was authentic. I think that's success for me.
Amazing. That is a really great measure you've attributed to success, dear Odini, and thank you very much for also sharing it with us here today. So, lastly, for our listeners who want to go get a copy of the 365 Dad Journal, tune into your podcast or just connect with you. So, where is the best place for them to go?
Yeah, I would say my YouTube channel and my website are and the podcast. Those three things kind of will lead you to everything I have. And so the website is www 365dad.com, and it's actually spelled out. So, THREESIXFIVEDAD. So 365dad.com, and that's going to lead you to my site where my journal is, my one-on-one coaching offer is, and then my YouTube channel, I think, is a great resource because it's just a ton of every week. It's a ton of value. And my podcast, I speak on the same topics on the podcast, but some people more so prefer like to listen in the car and they don't want to have to be watching YouTube while they're driving, right? And so if you're somebody who prefers more of an audio type of experience, then the Mindful Dad podcast is my podcast. So I would say my website, dad.com, my YouTube channel, just type in Odeani McBean and you'll see it there. And also the podcast. Those are the three best ways I would say to kind of get in contact with me.
All right, Odini, thank you very much for sharing that with us here today. It's been a truly amazing time having the conversation with you. Indeed, a really necessary conversation, and thank you very much for joining us on the show today.
Yeah, once again, thank you so much for having me, man. This is great. Anytime I get to talk about this stuff, this is like free therapy for me. So hopefully this conversation helped your listeners, and I'm looking forward to connecting in the future. Thank you.
The pleasure is mine.